This is News 12 Law Call.
Hi there, and welcome to News 12 Law Call. First time in our 8-year program, we've done a 2-part episode, and we're very, very pleased to be rejoined by the juvenile court judge in the city of Augusta, Kelly Spencer, and also the founder of the Hawk Law Group. And hello again to both of you.
Hi.
Great to see you again, Neil.
Absolutely. Vic, why don't you go ahead and introduce the judge and maybe set the tone a little bit about some of the needs of the juvenile court system as we move forward post-pandemic.
That's right. Well, y'all, I want you to understand that we try to give you programs that give you information, give you truthful, accurate information about the law and how the law is affecting you. We were lucky enough to get Judge Kelly Spencer to come on the program to answer questions about the juvenile court in Richmond County, Georgia, and it affects children throughout the Augusta Judicial Circuit, as well as children across the river in South Carolina, because the juvenile court systems work with those systems in South Carolina, as well as the South Carolina systems working with the Georgia systems to protect our children. Now, Judge Kelly Spencer is a full-time judge with the Augusta Judicial Circuit, providing juvenile services to the community. Now, we've had a recent development of an extreme need of having a judicial justice center for juveniles. Judge Kelly Spencer understands how the juvenile court system works, understands the needs of the systems, and more importantly, what should be done for the children in our community. So, Judge, happy to have you. We're going to answer a number of questions tonight. We kind of touched on it at the end of the last show. CHINS. CHINS is an acronym for a particular aspect of the juvenile court system providing services to juveniles. Can you explain to our viewers what CHINS is and what does it actually do for our children?
Certainly. Well, our CHINS component is our children in need of services. And what it does is it lets us identify children who potentially are truant at school, meaning they have at least 10 unexcused absences from school. Of course, there's all sorts of studies that indicate that a child that's not attending school, not receiving an education, is likely going to end up in the criminal justice system. So we try to identify those issues and address them. Additionally, we also are able to identify children who may be what we call unruly or habitually disobedient, where, of course, it's not a criminal offense, but we have a situation where the child is disrespectful to their parent repeatedly. The parent feels like they are somewhat losing control of their child. And we also have children that potentially are being exploited or trafficked. And we have been able to partner with other entities, including iCare, to provide specifically services to address some of the issues that we have with children who are being exploited. One of the main things we've seen is that children who have been identified as being exploited or trafficked, they tend to run. And so, of course, if they go into runaway, we can't provide services. We don't know where they are. So we want to identify those issues, address them, and hopefully deter these children from running.
And what do y'all do to help these kids that are in situations like this, where they're unruly, where they're truant, where they're being trafficked? What kind of things do y'all do for those kids?
Certainly. Well, it starts with our intake process, and we have a great team working with this. We call it our CHINS team, and we have an education specialist who actually was hired a few years ago, and she has years and years of history working with children, specifically in the education field. And so once these children are identified and they go through an intake process, we can look to see if this is a child that may be suffering from some mental health issues. We can have a psychological provided for that child so that we can have a psychologist specifically identify if there's issues with ADD, ADHD, ODD, so that we can address those issues, have the child in counseling, any kind of medication that they may need. Specifically for a child that we have identified as being exploited, we can look to get them involved with our eye care services and our NEXT program. And what that will do is specifically address some of the reasons why this child is being victimized in this way. It provides counseling services and all sorts of support for this child to, of course, encourage them not to continue this path. Additionally, we have educational services currently that we're housing over at Tubman, and that allows us to identify children who are in our GED program and need a little extra help. Also, some of our children who don't have all the credits. This summer, in fact, we housed our Thrive program over at Tubman, and we were able to successfully help all of our children who participated with getting the credits that they need to get promoted to the next grade. And so we're very happy with that success.
Yeah.
And Judge, boy, years ago, Vic remembers when we had on late Judge Doug Flanagan, who we just cared about so much. Eye care and trafficking, it just wasn't an issue. It was the more standard thing. So it's so interesting that you're taking such a positive role in trying to get a handle on this. So we applaud you for that. And Vic, there still is some drug issues, though, in our area. And KD has a question for you. KD was arrested for misdemeanor possession of marijuana at the age of 17. He cannot afford a lawyer. He's got a clean record. Should he plead guilty and hope for the best? What sentence would he get? And Vic, do we, because such the issue legislatively about marijuana may be legalized someday, is there some leniency given?
I think the Augusta Judicial Circuit, and particularly the state court solicitors, are recognizing that young people are being shackled with criminal histories for minor possession of marijuana, and they're providing all kinds of intervention programs as well as what's called pretrial diversion type of approach to it. At the very least, he should plead no contest so that it can't be used against him in the future. But I wouldn't plead guilty. I would get a public defender. The public defender will, especially with no record, will direct them away from a conviction in that case. And certainly the judge could give first offender treatment, which would not result in a conviction. A lot of options there.
Okay, and on the other side of the break, we'll ask Kelly whether a young person gets tried in juvenile court or maybe tried in big boy court, if you will. Please stick around. Juvenile Justice Part 2, our topic. You're watching News 12 Law Call.
Welcome back to News 12 Law Call with award-winning broadcaster Neil Gordon. And from the Hawk Law Group, attorney Vic Hawk, with more than 30 years experience and millions of dollars awarded to his clients. Attorney Reed Sanders, born and raised in Thompson and known for his strong courtroom skills. With criminal law, former police officer, now lawyer Sean Merzlach. And with South Carolina injury law, trial attorney Chase Hawk. Plus guest attorneys from across the CSRA. Your rights, your calls, live. News 12 Law Call.
Hi there, and welcome back to our Zoom edition of News 12 Law Call. This is part 2 of our chat with the judge, Miss Kelly Spencer, juvenile court judge in the city of Augusta. They're headquartered on Telfair Street, not too far from the headquartered offices of the Hawk Law Group. Our founder, Vic Hawk, is joining Kelly today. And Vic, we thought we'd start the second segment with you, you've dealt with criminal cases through the years, assaults, if you will, and Steve's son was assaulted last month by a neighbor's kid. He gave him a concussion, a broken cheekbone. He has been arrested, but Steve would like to sue the family. Does Steve have to wait until the criminal trial is over, or can the civil case come first?
You do not have to wait until the criminal trial is over. You can go ahead and file your civil claim, and actually the parents can be held responsible up to a limited amount. The last time I looked was $15,000 in damages for criminal mischief by a child. So you would have a potential claim against the parents arising from it. 99% of the lawyers in the community don't know that. But it's not covered by insurance, but there is a potential claim.
Okay.
You can file
Kelly.
it. Sorry.
Oh, sure. Kelly, we have a few questions for you about young people getting in trouble and what can happen to them and where they go and how they get tried. And Jason's question is, what are the factors determining whether someone is tried in juvenile court or tried as an adult?
Okay, that's a great question, because people, I think, often assume that if you are 18 or under, you're a child, and that automatically guarantees that your matter will be heard in juvenile court. And that's not actually accurate. What we look at is at the time of the alleged criminal action, was the individual under the age of 17? If they are under the age of 17, then yes, they can be considered to hear their matter in juvenile court. However, there are some exceptions to that rule. If you look at what the actual offense is that the young person has been charged with, if it is, I guess, what some people like to consider our 7 deadlies, or the more serious offenses where someone could, if they were an adult, potentially be subject to the death penalty or life without parole, those kind of offenses, despite your age, could allow it to be heard in in adult court. And so, for instance, if someone between the ages of 13 and 17 at the time that the offense occurs, if it's a murder offense, then yes, that will likely be heard in adult court. However, the DA does have discretion that in some instances they can ask for a matter to be transferred down from adult court to juvenile court under certain circumstances.
Okay. And help us with some clarity on this next question by Jackson. Jackson's son has been put in the detention center. I don't know if he means something like YDC or the actual jail for more adults. What happens now, and how can Jackson help his son?
Certainly. Well, I think it's going to depend on at what point of his matter is he at the detention center. There's a possibility that once the offense has been committed, that a child can be detained at a local detention center, which would be our RYDC. And in that instance, you would be looking, if this is immediate and this has just happened, we would be looking to bring the child back to court almost immediately to have an official hearing to decide if we will continue to detain that child at the RYDC until we can, what we call, adjudicate them as delinquent. If in fact we do decide to hold them based on the information that we receive and we finding that it's necessary and needed to do so, then the child will remain until we come back to court for our next hearing, which would be an adjudication. For adults, it's kind of like, I guess, arraignment, where you would plead and you would enter your plea. Of course, we don't call children guilty, they are delinquent. And if in fact that happened, we would then go on to the next phase, our disposition, which in adult terms would be sentencing. And if it warranted it under the circumstances, the child could then potentially receive an order to serve additional time, or they could receive an order that would allow them to be released. Now, if the child has already completed that disposition and they're serving time in a detention center under the terms of their sentence, then they will remain. I would encourage the parent to be as involved as possible, make sure that they are contacting their child speaking to them. I know we have some limitations now with COVID, and I would just encourage them to talk to their child and keep their spirits up.
Kelly, for parents with a teen watching, or maybe a teenage girl or guy, what is our youth detention center like?
Honestly, I like to tell the kids that come in front of me that it's kind of the equivalent of it's like a jail for children. If you're here locally, we only hold you there on a temporary basis. But if you've been sentenced, then we would look to take you to the YDC, which would be a more permanent, almost you can look at that as like a prison, where you would stay on a more permanent basis. But it's not anywhere any of our children want to be. They're going to tell you when you wake up. They're going to tell you what you get to eat. They determine what you wear. They determine what you can do during the day. And there's not much. And so it's definitely not a place any of our young people want to be, even on a temporary basis.
Good sage advice. We'll talk a little bit more about jury trials in juvenile court and marijuana possession, as well as we wrap up our edition, part 2 of Juvenile Justice with the judge and Vic Hawk. Please stick around. You're watching News 12 Law Call. Well, what an enjoyable past few weeks of segments with Judge Kelly Spencer, who is the judge in the juvenile court system on Telfair Street in downtown Augusta. For a lot of information for your teen, you may want to go to augustagA.gov/1859/juvenile-court. Remember, all fours, if you want to get in touch with the Hawk Law Group at one of their 4 offices, 706 all fours, and online at hawklawgroup.com. We want to jump back to our email questions and give Judge Spencer an opportunity to discuss something important to her. This comes from Sam. And Sam wants to know, under what circumstances, Kelly, would a teenager be removed from their home for their own good, their own safety?
Certainly. And that actually deals with our dependency matters. And so what we have to do is initially make a finding that a child is dependent due to abuse or neglect that they have received in the home. But we have to take it a step further and find that, in addition, there's immediate risk to that child's safety and well-being if we did not remove them from the home with their parent or guardian. And so we may have a situation where a child is being physically or sexually abused by a parent. And of course, that would be an obvious concern and need for us to have to remove that child. You also may have a situation where the parents suffer from substance abuse issues. And it's not technically a guarantee that just because a parent uses drugs, that's automatically going to create a safety risk. But if, in addition to that parent having a substance abuse issue, we also find that they are neglecting their child's needs, where because of their substance abuse, they're not able to make sure the child is getting to school. They're not able to make sure the child is being properly fed or clothed. They're not able to keep the house in proper order as far as having running water, having electricity, keeping it reasonably clean and appropriate. Then we can find that if we were to fail to remove that child would suffer some injury. And so we would look to therefore remove the child from the home. Now, I know one of the biggest misconceptions is that once we remove a child, they automatically go into the foster care system. Well, that is not always the case. The last thing we want is for a child under these circumstances, a child who's experienced trauma in their home, to have to now then go into foster care. And so we do try to identify what we call a fictive kin or a family member who would be able to take the child into their home while we look to implement services for the parent to give them the opportunity to try to work, make things better, and be able to have their child return to their home.
Okay. Vic, we've got a a marijuana question for you. Mary's son was charged with possession at the age of 15, and will this stay on his permanent record after he turns 18, or might this be expunged?
Well, juvenile court records are going to be guaranteed a certain level of secrecy, and so it will not be something that will be on his record. However, that information would be available to law enforcement agencies should he engage in this kind of conduct in the future.
Kelly, I don't know how else to ask this, is marijuana the drug of choice for the kids that come through your courtroom?
Honestly, I would say that it used to be, and now we're actually seeing an increase in some of the drugs that the children are using. They're starting to use more serious drugs. And of course, because of that, we're having to make sure that we are identifying the issue and trying to get an assessment completed and make sure that we're able to provide services, because a child that starts engaging in drug use that early obviously raise a concern. Is it because they're being exposed through their parents' use and their parents using it in front of them in the home? Are they being exposed to it because of the friends that they're spending their time with? We want to make sure we identify those issues and address them quickly.
And another quick question for you from Morris. Do you have a right to a jury trial in juvenile court, or do they simply come in front of you?
No, there is no right to a jury trial. We have what will be the equivalent of a bench trial. So the judge gets to hear all the evidence and testimony and render a decision.
Lastly, are juveniles entitled to be bailed out after an arrest like adults are?
A juvenile who is potentially charged in adult court would have that right. In juvenile court itself, we pretty much either detain a child or allow them to be released directly to their parents, sometimes with electronic monitoring or under a homebound situation.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like we have enough information for a 5-part series. So, but rather than hold you over, can we ask you to come back another time in the future?
Certainly, I would love to.
Thank you. Vic, thank you so much. This has been a great couple of weeks.
I agree. Thank y'all for watching.